What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by rock band Ghostfire. Basically, this project is called the Tyburn Jig and Other Popular Dances, and it came out in the fall of 2011. The thing about this particular project is it took Ghostfire a little bit to actually drop their debut project. They were kind of more steampunk for a while. They do kind of more like shanty type music and waltz type music, folklore type music, pitches like that as far as that particular kind of goes. Apparently steampunk is like a subgenre, some pitches like that. It was pretty popular 2009, 2008, 2010 pitches like that, I'd have to say. They dropped a couple of EPs, one of which was the Drunken Lullabies EP, which came out in 2008. I've reviewed every project by Ghostfire with the exception of this one, which I'm reviewing now. So they have 4 projects. Drunken Lullabies came out in 2008. Last Steampunk Waltz, the brief 2-song EP, came out in early 2010. And then Skeleton Coast came out in the fall of 2013. That's their most recent project. They have dropped a batch of singles between like 2021 and 2022 and stuff, but they haven't been around since like late 2022, something like that, I'd have to say. But I don't know if they're going to drop an album on the Ghostfire Wiki, which is the page I'm on right now, basically says they were originally going to put out an album in 2023, but it just never happened. So it's kind of here and there as to whether or not they're going to. They're kind of very low key. It's just kind of the concept about it. They have information about them, but you kind of have to search more for it just in terms of that relative pitch as far as that particular kind of goes. Just would have to say, I mean, you can find information, but it's just not broadcasted in full blown amounts. And their YouTube page only has like 2,500 subscribers or so, so it's kind of the pitch. They don't oftenly update it, and I want to say it has less than 15 or 16 videos on there. So it's just kind of the concept, very here and there, kind of like a bluesy kind of day when they do update. Just being able to say that, definitely kind of a once in a blue moon type situation as far as that kind of goes. But yeah, this is their only album in terms of what they did. They kind of retired from public life in 2015. So after their 2013 EP, they toured, maybe did some shows for a couple of years, and then vanished in 2015. Came back in late 2021. This is a pretty damn good album. This is up there with the rest of their projects. I've scored enough. I've scored all of their projects now, and most of them I've given like at least a 9 or a 10 out of 10. This project is definitely going to get a pretty rave score. I'd have to say just some excellent stuff here to kind of get. This particular project had 3 singles from it, or at least 3 music videos as far as that pitch kind of went. I would say that The Man is the main single from this particular project, but the Vaudevillian and Masters of the Sea songs were also on the 2008 EP Drunken Lullaby, so it's a pretty good pitch to kind of get those in particular, I'd say. But this is basically like a classic album here, I'd say. Just the interesting concept. I realize that there's a learning curve to this particular band and the stuff that they do, especially if you're only familiar with their most popular songs, which would be The Last Steampunk Waltz and Hand of Glory, some of those type ones. I would definitely say that that's probably their most popular project for the most part. I mean, they do have other hit songs and pitches like that, but it just kind of feels like compared to that steampunk jig that they did in 2010, it just feels like maybe folks wanted more songs like that. But it's just the difficult thing about that particular stuff is just the fact that steampunk is such an off to the wayside type subgenre. It's just kind of the concept of trying to replicate that, because I do feel like they replicate some of their best moments and formats. It's just kind of the concept that for such an awkward and kind of more offhanded subgenre, it's just kind of the concept that it's a difficult kind of song to replicate, just because it kind of feels like steampunk is just kind of more like this kind of fad like and more of like a 15 minutes of fame type subgenre as far as that pitching goes. But it's definitely not the case. I mean, it's popular in Europe and pitches like that, some of those type things. But I just would have to say it's just kind of the concept that they were kind of painted into a corner as far as trying to replicate those particular popularity from like the late 2000s, early 2010s. But I think definitely this is a classic album here. I'd have to say is this kind of concept that has a learning curve towards it. It's this kind of thing. It has a lot of haunting type music pitches like that. Obviously, with them being Ghostfire, some of these songs really have like a real ghoulish type personality. There are some up tempo songs in here and there. I'd have to say there's just a good concept of some of these. Some of these ones like The Man, Vaudevillian, and Smoke and Mirrors. Some of these particular type ones, they do have some up tempo type moments for some beer swilling and kind of folklore type, this cabaret type stuff just within that relative pitch. I definitely feel like those are some of those best moments, just because that's what the last Steampunk Waltz and Hand of Glory kind of did. Was this kind of the concept that I do like some of this haunting kind of makeshift on here. There's some ruminating songs on here, some pitches like that. Just some kind of very ghostly this type of peals that just kind of go along with it. Just the after effect. Just a lot of peering and kind of ruminating as far as those particular pitches kind of go. Just within the aspect of just kind of being more thoughtful. Just within the aspect of just contemplation and those sorts of things that I have to say. But I do appreciate the concept of it, because there's not a ton of bands that really did this. I mean, Marilyn Manson and Korn were kind of similar to some of this particular type of stuff, but they just were more ground. Korn's ruminating was just kind of more in a more down to earth type format. I mean, saying at least for Korn, I mean, compare Korn is down to earth compared to like Ghostfire in terms of that relative pitch. But Corn is pretty haunting and ghoulish as well as this kind of the concept I look after. I do appreciate the ruminating on here. For the most part, out of the 10 songs on this particular album, I wound up recommending 8. So we'll talk about the singles, I'll talk about Vaudevillian and Masters of the Sea again, and then I'll talk about the new single, The Man. Then we'll talk about the 8 songs I recommend. So basically, the only 2 songs I don't recommend on this particular project would just be Book of Dust and then Drink Ski song. So this project is going to get a 10 out of 10. But we'll go ahead and talk about the singles here. So if you go to Ghostfire's YouTube page, basically you'll find that they did 3 music videos for this particular album. One was Vaudevillian, the other was Masters of the Sea, and then the new single is The Man. So I'll talk about Vaudevillian first. Basically, this is like a ghastly kind of up-tempo 19th century. It's like a ghastly kind of up-tempo 19th century dance. This is like a ghastly kind of up-tempo 19th century dance jig of a song. I'd have to say definitely some beer-swilling fun. I'd have to say in particular in this song, this has a haunting feel, and the haunting feel is pretty intoxicating. I'd have to say it's definitely a great concept to get that. But just the concept. I mean, once again, this was on Drunken Lullabies, the EP that I reviewed back in 2023. As far as that pitch kind of goes, just some excellent type stuff to kind of get here. Do appreciate this particular song, and this pretty much has like a pretty simmering old. This has like a pretty crotchety old world type feel about it, which is pretty awesome. Just the concept of just like going to like a saloon, some pitches like that, some of those type gigs, just where you'd be more dressed up in like pioneer gigs and outfits as far as that particular kind of goes. Definitely some costume party type stuff and pitches like that. This has a real good refinement, just real old school, just old fashioned as far as that particular kind of goes. Like a saloon type thing, just out of like the 1930s, 1920s, some pitches like that, where you'd see more beer mugs and pitches like that. But it's a great concept to kind of get some of those particular ones. This is an up tempo one, definitely pretty good retro kind of party song just to kind of have in particular, pretty nice one. Masters of the Sea is the next single. This is a nice one as well. This is also on Drunken Lullabies. This is like a creeping, kind of simmering autumn haze of a song I'd have to say in particular. It's like a tittering kind of work shift grease of a song I would definitely have to say. And this is just some good, grim blue collar, I'd have to say. So it's pretty excellent concept here. This one's not as much of like in a more, this one's not as much dance oriented or in like a pub type atmosphere, some drink swelling type atmospheres as far as that pitch can go. It's just a little bit more, I mean, I would say car centric, obviously, with the concept of it being more retro and 20th, 19th century, some of those type pitches is just kind of relative to whether or not it's car centric. But this is kind of the concept of just traversing pitches like that, just within the aspect of just appreciating like the work shifts, some of those type pitches, just in a more cabaret type aspect, a little bit more old fashioned. So it's a dope concept, kind of get this very haunting, like Korn and Marilyn Manson. Mushroom Head, some of those type folks that I'd say just the concept of just being a little bit more work shift oriented, just for more get to work, some of those type fashions, I'd have to say. But then The Man is the new single. This is a pretty nice one. This one's very similar to Vaudevillian. Definitely appreciate this concept. This is a creeping kind of debonair up-tempo snap of a song, I'd have to say. This is definitely some old school 19th century feel that this song particularly kind of has. And this is just some good cabaret type jive. This is definitely a pretty good foot tapper. So I appreciate this concept getting another up tempo type one because I do appreciate getting this type song like The Man because I do feel like Ghostfire has some pretty offhanded energy that usually goes on some of their more lead singles and pitches like that. Just when they get some of these creeping type ones that just have a lot of good jive about them, just old world century type pitches, just like Hand to Glory and Steampunk Waltz and Vaudevillian and some of those type ones in particular that they kind of did. This is another good example of that. Just a good kind of creeping, just real debonair type, just a real kind of creeping, refined type one to kind of get for like some beer mug swilling pitches like that. Just swashbuckling, some of those type pitches kind of have within that relative aspect. Old fashioned, but just the concept of being like a good dance jig, some of those type pitches just to kind of have within that aspect. So it's a nice one. Just real, I mean, this is probably one of the most approachable type ones in terms of this relative album. I do feel like this album's going to get a pretty high score. I don't know if I'm going to give this social score like a 10 out of 10 just because it has kind of a learning curve towards it. Obviously, with them not having a full-blown amount of hits, I'm not sure. I mean, I would like to say that they probably could fill out a greatest hits album, but they're pretty much folks that don't really have like the forecast of really having charting singles as far as that pitch goes. They're just more kind of underground and just off the wayside type stuff. But this is definitely a good attempt about doing it. It's just kind of, you just have to have a little bit more imaginative. You just have to have a little bit more imaginative type elasticity as far as wanting some of these rock-handed songs. So it's just kind of concept that it is very much underground, but it is a pretty good pitch just because the offhandedness of it's pretty catchy. I'd have to say it's just good. It's just a good concept. So yeah, it's just one. This is the most commercial that they're probably going to get for the most part. This is the lead single off of their only albums. It's a pretty good pitch to kind of get this. This kind of concept that's just, it's an acquired taste, but it works. This would have to say. So that's the basic concept of it. Pretty hit single here. I'd say liked all 3 of the singles. I would check out their YouTube to see the music videos. That's the style that they kind of have, so you know what you're working with as far as that particular kind of goes. That's the concept. So Yeah, basically me recommending 8 songs out of 10 on this particular product. This album's going to get a 10 out of 10. Just like most of the other Ghostfire products, like I was saying, there's some excellent type stuff here. I do have a pretty tasteful, acquired taste for this particular band, so they just have some real haunting type stuff that just has a lot of ghoulish appeal. So we'll go ahead and talk about some of these songs on here. The Sticks, the last song you hear on here is a pretty nice one. It's like a ghoulish kind of ruminating cut, I'd have to say in particular. It's definitely some night traverse and drifting dredge, I'd have to say in particular. And this is just like a basic kind of pondering song with like an empty feel. Basic pondering with an empty feel, I'd have to say. So it's a dope concept. Kind of get this. This is the sort of stuff that, compared to Korn and Marilyn Manson, they're just the edginess and this overall ghoulishness that they're ruminating and the lack of not being down to earth is pretty shown, I'd have to say, which is an awesome concept. I do like some of these just to kind of drift and have some of those type pitches just to kind of peer in pitches like that and just to appreciate like the aspect of dislike, thoughts of dislike, this pondering contemplation, life and death pitches like that as far as that particular kind of goes. Just some excellent kind of stuff to kind of get here. Just really appreciate the pitch towards it. Another song that's pretty similar to that is Dance of Fate. This one's pretty similar to the Sticks, but this has a more dusky type feel about it. This is like a dusky kind of gloomy ruminating tune. I'd have to say this definitely like a Smoke one, Smoke a Swisher, some pitches like that. Even if you're in Europe, I don't know if they have Swishers in Europe. I would definitely have to say a good song to Smoke one too. Some haunting kind of skepticisms I'd have to say in particular. And this is just like a crisp kind of cooler autumn malaise I'd have to say. So this one can almost be work shift type haze, but it's just kind of the concept. This feels like a dusky kind of evening to something really for like 6:37 p.m. Some pitches like that. The Sticks is a little bit more night based. These are just kind of more pitch of the evening type flare as far as a particular kind of goes. Just night traverse, residential type fare. Maybe walking to the gas station. Just kind of thoughts on your mind. Just pitches like that. I suppose just really appreciate the concept of a lot of these. Just within that relative aspect of some of these type ones. I mean, it's interesting kind of get Ghostfire when they're not just in like a dance floor or something like that, or at least a pub, some sort of venue, some sort of pitch like that, restaurant, some of those type pitches just to kind of have for their normal beer swing. Because this is the concept they do have some good aspects. I would say more work shift type songs like Masters of the Sea are on here as well. So, but the first song you hear on this particular album, Smoke and Mirrors, is a pretty nice one. It's like a pub crawl kind of swashbuck. Smoke and Mirrors is like some pub crawl kind of swashbuckling, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a folkish but ghastly kind of groove that this song particularly kind of has. And this is just an energizing, get crunk kind of autumn noise, I'd have to say in particular. Really appreciate this one. Really like the organs on this particular song. This has a real haunting type of appeal, but it switches to like a more focused type tune later on. Just kind of in between like Masters of the Sea and Vaudevillian, I'd have to say in particular. Just kind of an in between, where it's not quite as full blown much as of like beer swilling dance craze as much as Vaudevillian, but it also is not quite as work shift as Masters of the Sea, I'd have to say in particular. It's just kind of one that can pretty much be played at a pub and pitches like that, but just has the concept of a little bit of a work shift type folk in there. Just kind of after hours, just maybe entry initial type stuff of just getting to like the pub and pitches like that or the dance club, some of those type pitches, or at least relative night venue, those sorts of pitches as far as that kind of goes. The Confession song's a pretty nice one. It's like a jazzy kind of revved up. The Confession is like a jazzy kind of revved up hauntiness, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a typical kind of ghoulish night and basic kind of after hours commerce of a song, I'd have to say. Really appreciate this, the overall ghostly type appeal of this one. This is like a real poltergeist type one in terms of the overall haunting appeal. This is the sort of stuff that Korn, Marilyn Manson, some of those folks kind of do in particular. This one has pretty good casual type appeal about it. I had to say it's not quite as otherworldly and just kind of more offhanded and more left field as far as that pitch goes. Definitely a pretty nice one. Reminds me of this stuff that would be in like horrorcore raps and pitches like that. It's a real nice ghoulish type beat to kind of have for like Halloween time and autumn time as far as that pitch kind of goes. It's a real nice one. Just a revved up type song. This works pretty well for that relative aspect. It's a nice one. I'd say the Confession and the Man are two immediate ones to kind of go for in terms of the normal format. Then I'd also recommend the other two singles, Vaudevillian and Masters of the Sea. Those are just some all haunting type ones. And then Creep Show is a pretty nice one. It's like a day after hours kind of refined conduct of a song, I'd have to say. It's like some great autumn malaise I would definitely feel like. This is like some great autumn malaise I would definitely feel like, and this is just a brushy but mild kind of social activity hit, I'd have to say. So this is just a concept of one. Maybe you just have like a good dance gig to get to, something like that, some ballroom type stuff as far as that particular kind of goes. Just more graceful and refined type stuff, more sophistication in this particular one. And Creep Show, I'd have to say, really appreciate this one. It's maybe not so much like this beer swelling and dance club type pitches and pub crawling as far as that particular kind of goes. It's a little bit more refined aspect, maybe a little bit more gussied up, some of those type pitches. But I do like the overall Dracula type feel of this particular song. It really feels more conservative and just more refined just within that aspect. So it's a pretty nice one. Definitely a haunting type one just to have for a real graceful kind of creepy in October, I'd have to say. So it's a pretty good pitch. Probably need another song like this. Would have been a pretty good pitch to have gotten that, but it's pretty awesome aspects. So that's the concept of this particular album. So talk about the two songs I didn't recommend on here. Basically, I just didn't like the production. Get Up, A Book of Dust. That one, I kind of liked the production, but it just switched it up too much. It would kind of have like this thumping part and like the verses, and then it would switch to like a more guitar riffage on there. But it just did it too quickly for my taste. I kind of somewhat like the verse lineup of how that kind of happened, but I just wish that they would have lengthened the way that the instrumentation kind of happened with it. It was just kind of, it just felt kind of messier than it probably needed to as far as that pitch kind of went. I do like the vocals and melodies on Book of Dust, and that was almost like the ninth song out of 10 that I full blown recommended on here. But this album's going to get a 10 out of 10 anyway. But this album's going to get a 10 out of 10 anyway, so this is kind of the concept. But this was almost like the ninth song that I recommended on here, but it just didn't quite make the cut, I'd say. And then Drink Ski Song was just kind of, and then Drink Ski Song was just kind of a song that didn't amount to much. I'd have to say in particular that one was just kind of a poor type one that I just didn't appreciate as much. It was just kind of a messier type format. It was kind of an up tempo type one, trying to be more like vaudevillian and some of those type ones in Smoke and Mirrors, but it just didn't pull out the vibe as much. I just feel like the instrumentation, overall band work of that particular song was just kind of offhanded in terms of the aspect of just like the synchronization that kind of went along with it. So that's just kind of concept about it, I have to say. But yeah, basically this album gets a 10 out of 10. The social score, that's kind of tricky though. I think I'm going to give the social score, I think I'll give the social score like a 9.5 out of 10, just because I feel like there's some quality stuff on here, but it gets slashed like maybe a half point just because of like the overall, it gets slashed like a half point just because of the overall learning curve that kind of goes along with it. I feel like there's some good songs on here, but if you truly come to this band just because you're full-blown fans of like the last Steampunk Waltz, some of their biggest songs like Vaudevillian, Steampunk Waltz, Hand to Glory, some of those type ones, I feel like the learning curve on here is good, but just the sheer, I feel like the sheer number of up-tempo songs is kind of here and there in terms of the immediate factors. Some of these that this is like a kick-ass single, something like that. Just this is radio ready. Some of those type ones that just have that casual appeal, just kind of more questionable within a certain sense. I feel like The Man is definitely a pretty hit song, but it just kind of has somewhat of a learning curve just because it may not have the full blown, just immediate catchiness of like some of their biggest hits. Vaudevillian and Masters of the Sea are on here, but you can find those on the Drunken Lullabies EP. And then like Smoke and Mirrors and like The Confession are some good, nice ones to kind of have for some immediate type sense. But I just would have to say it's this kind of concept that it just is the questionnaire as to how much your taste towards is this the question as to how much your taste towards is this kind of the question your taste towards cabaret type music and more swashbuckling type tunes is within that retro kind of old century type aspect as far as how tuned it kind of is just within how that kind of goes. So it's this kind of concept, but there is some immediate ones. I definitely would say some immediate ones once again would be The Confession, Smoke and Mirrors, a real nice one, The Man's a real nice one, and then the other two singles, Vaudevillian and Masters of the Sea, are some nice ones, but they do have some pretty good aspects. It's the real concept of it. So 9.5 social. In terms of the future, like this is the last Ghostfire project to review, unless they put out an album, which I'm not sure if they will. They've been dropping singles, like I've said, so it's this kind of concept. They were supposed to drop an album in 2023, but it didn't happen. Maybe it'll happen in 2024, but for the most part, I reviewed every project by Ghostfire, all four of them. So I just would check out the Ghostfire playlist and fuck with some of these. I do recommend this band quite a bit, and I would recommend to try out their learning curve as far as that particular kind of goes, because they do have some haunting type stuff that just has a different touch on like stuff that Marilyn Manson and Korn kind of do, just within a more old century type fare. So definitely some excellent type stuff to get here. And yeah, just despite the fact that some of this stuff is harder to find and less known about, I would still recommend it quite a bit.